Lesson 4. We're going to consider in this lesson a few other questions that have to do with, am I prepared? To me, this is one of the biggest failures today in marriages. Everyone assumes they're already prepared. And I suppose if someone was brought up in a completely secure, loving home, they may be fairly well prepared, especially if their parents have trained them to help in the home. But as we look at some of these questions, there are many that need more training. Now, the next sub-question that we'll look at is my character developed sufficiently? So here's another one about character. This was written to a specific young person. It says, you have peculiarities of character which need to be sternly disciplined and resolutely controlled before you can with any safety enter the marriage relation. Therefore, marriage should be put from your mind until you overcome the defects in your character, for you would not make a happy wife. And then it explains what character flaw did this young woman have. You have neglected to educate yourself for systematic household labor. You have not seen the necessity of acquiring habits of industry. So here, the picture I get is that this young lady was on the lazy side, especially when it had to do with the work in the home. Now, of course, I believe that the husband should help with some of the work in the home, but still, the major portion, unless both are working full-time, the major portion falls upon the wife. So, if she doesn't know how to cook, and she doesn't know how to clean properly, and do all the things around the home, that's going to bring stress to the marriage, especially if the husband is used to having good meals and so on. Of course, some people just buy a lot of their food ready-made or go out to restaurants a lot, but you spend a lot of money when you do that. You put a big financial drain on the family finances, and it almost makes it impossible for the mother to be home with the children. So it's much better to have that education before getting married. Here's one also. Have I acquired sufficient practical skills? Now we talked about some of the practical skills last time, but here's some more. It is the right of every daughter of Eve to have a thorough knowledge of the household duties, to receive training in every department of domestic labor. Every young lady should be so educated that if called to fill the position of wife and mother, she may preside as a queen in her own domain. Now, you can't turn the clock back, but if your parents did it right, then they gave the young woman this kind of training in the home. She should be fully competent to guide and instruct her children and to direct her servants, or if need be, to minister with her own hands to the wants of her household. Now, in our country today, not too many people can hire servants, although I guess quite a few people hire somebody to do part of the housework. As we look here, though, Notice there is the instruction of the children. This is probably the biggest lack, that before marriage there is no training or experience in working with small children. And so the typical situation is that, well, a baby's on the way, and so we scramble to try to learn some things to prepare for the arrival of the baby, but we don't learn enough fast enough. And so the baby arrives, and pretty soon the baby's in charge of the home, not the parents. And it's very frustrating, so that many mothers say, well, I'd rather work and just give the children to a babysitter, because it's so discouraging and so difficult. But that wouldn't be true if she had received training about how to work with children. It is her right to understand the mechanism of the human body and the principles of hygiene, the matters of diet and dress, labor and recreation, and countless others that intimately concern the well-being of her household. Now here's quite a list of things, and they're all important, but I think understanding healthful living is one of the most important, which includes knowledge of physiology. How does the body function? Because if you understand that, you know how to cooperate with it. But if you don't, then you're damaging everyone in the family, damaging their health without realizing it. I think in general the hygiene is pretty good in this country, but if there's a need there to learn, that's important. The meals are extremely important. So something about how to provide nutritious meals is important. Dress is also important, because there are ways of dressing that damage our health, and this is not good, especially when it starts in childhood, and it sets up problems for later in life. Also, what kind of recreation is beneficial and good for the family? But then it says countless others. So there's a lot of things that need to be learned. It is her right to obtain such a knowledge of the best methods of treating disease that she can care for her children in sickness, instead of leaving her precious treasures in the hands of stranger nurses and physicians. So we go back to the health. That's really important, and it includes knowing what we can do in the home. Naturally, there are very serious diseases that we wouldn't be able to handle in the home, but many of the smaller diseases that take place, we can learn how to cope with those in the home. It saves money. It is more appreciated because our children and our wife or husband love us, and they have confidence in us. And then to go somewhere else to get the care is not the most ideal. So this gives a list of things that, if the homes were thinking from the youngest years, I need to prepare my child for the day that they want to get married, a lot of this would be learned by 25. But if it hasn't been learned, it's wise to take a little time and dig into these subjects. Now this next one's pretty strong, but I can see the value of it. It should be a law the young people should not get married unless they know how to care for the children that are brought into their family. So suppose when we went down to the courthouse to get a marriage license, they checked us out to see if we really knew how to care for children. And if we failed the test, then we couldn't get a marriage license. It says it would be better if it was like that. Of course, we know it's not. They do very little checking on our eligibility. Here in Georgia and Tennessee, they do require a few hours of premarital instruction. So they won't give a license without it. They must know how to take care of the house that God has given them. It's talking about our body, know how to care for our body. Unless they understand in regard to the laws which God has established in their system, they cannot understand their duty to their God or themselves. We have a responsibility to God even to keep our body in healthy condition. We cannot really serve Him if we are sickly as well. We should try, but we how much better it is if we are healthy. And one more that gives just a little more, a few more ideas in it. Before taking upon themselves the possibilities of fatherhood and motherhood. Now, when do we take upon ourselves that possibility? It's when we get married. So before marriage, men and women should become acquainted with the laws of physical development, with physiology and hygiene, with the bearing of prenatal influences. So there's a new one. Even during the 9 months while the baby is forming, if we don't know how to live in that period of time and the dangers, just to give you one example, let's say the husband doesn't realize the importance of his wife having a peaceful experience during this time. And there's arguing and all kinds of uncomfortable things going on. That will affect the baby. And then we will have more struggles with the baby after he or she is born. So we need to understand the impact of prenatal influences, and what the mother does is even more important than the husband because the baby is developing inside her. Here's some other topics. With the laws of heredity, to understand how heredity works and passes on things that you would never dream get passed on. Sanitation, we talked about that. Dress. Exercise, the importance of exercise to keep the body healthy, and the treatment of disease. They should also understand the laws of mental development and moral training. So there's two more. There is a need to train the mind of each child that is born in the best way, but if we don't understand how to develop the mental capacity, then a lot of mistakes are going to be made. And the moral training is also extremely important, especially if you're a Christian and you want your child to grow up to love God and follow Him. Then we need to prune off the characteristics that are not according to God's will. And all of that, the parents, according to this quote, need to know how to do that before they get married. Now, if you're out of the home already, how are you going to get that ability to learn? Well, classes are needed, but experience is needed too, I believe. And the two best ways to get it is through babysitting someone's small children and offering to work in the children's department in church, because there you can put to use what you may be learning in some classwork, or by getting just counsel from somebody who knows how that area should be. So this is all, laying a solid foundation so that when you get married, you have a good chance that your marriage can succeed.